Hi, I'm Stephen and welcome to Bits and Bobs in Photoshop. So this is my first tutorial here on Photoshop for YouTube, with hopefully many more to follow along the way, with some photo manipulation tutorials too in the near future hopefully. So I thought I'd kick off with displacement maps in Photoshop. I was recently asked about this, how I applied some textures to some clothing, and I mentioned I use displacement maps and people wanted to know more, so I thought I'd share this information with you guys on YouTube here. So I've already got an image open here and I've decided that we're going to change the texture on this guy's jacket. The textures I'm going to use are this flowery image right here. We're going to use this abstract kind of watercolor painting thing here, and I thought this abstract kind of shapes would be a nice one to use, and this floral pattern that I've used once before, so we'll give that a go as well. Out of interest, if you're wondering where I got these images from, I got this one, and this one. No, sorry, I said a lie. I got this one, and this one from pexels.com. This one is by Judson Moore from unsplash.com, and this image is by Hust Wilson from unsplash.com. So let's get started then. So first of all, we need to create our displacement map. Now what a displacement map will do, it will look at our image, it finds the difference in tone between the dark areas and the light areas, and it kind of adds, the best way to describe it would be like bumps and creases in the fold, so it adds depth and high points to anything we apply that displacement map to. So in this case we're going to apply it to one of our textures. Before we do that, we want to go over, this is a locked background layer at the moment, we set by the little locked icon. We can simply double click on this and give it a name. I'm going to call this original and just hit enter to OK. Right, now we have our image. The next thing I want to do now is to copy this original layer. We don't want to destroy this yet, we want to come back to this and apply our textures to this. So what I want to do is I want to make a copy. We can copy a layer by pressing Control J on the keyboard, or we can go right click on the layer itself and choose duplicate layer. Let's do that now we've got it open. We can give it a name at this point, whatever we want to do. Let's call it displacement map, why not? Displacement map, okay. So now we have our displacement map layer. The next thing we want to do now is we want all the colour removed from our image, because we only want to look at the tone between the dark and light areas. We don't need the colour information in there. To do that, there's many a way to do that in Photoshop, but I'm going to go here and click on hue and saturation, and I'm going to get the saturation slider and simply slide it all the way to the left till it says -100, and it's removed all the colour from our image. The next thing I want to do is come down here again, click here and create a curves layer. Now curves, what they do is when we click on this line here, this diagonal line, our curves line, if we click here we get a point. Anywhere we click on this line we're going to get points. So we click here and we drag it down, the image will get darker. If we drag up, the image is going to get lighter. Simple. So what we want to do is we want to add a slight bit of contrast between the darker areas on the image and the lighter areas on the image. So I'm going to place a dot here and I'm going to place a point here, and I'm going to drag this one down slightly to increase the dark areas, and I might just push this one up slightly just to make those areas slightly lighter, like so. We've got a slight gradual S-curve that actually might be a little bit extreme. Let's just knock that up a little bit more maybe. Let's have a look. Yeah, I'm happy with that. And that is pretty much good enough for me. So now we've got our curves, adding our contrast. We've got our hue and saturation, which turned it into a grayscale or black and white image. And we've got our displacement map layer. Now we need to select all these three layers. We can turn this one off actually for now. We want to select just these three layers. We can do that by holding down the control key and clicking each layer, or with the top one selected or the bottom one selected, whatever way you want to do this. We can hold down the shift key and just click the bottom one and it will select all of them for us. Once we have them selected, we can right click and choose merge layers. We merge the layers all into one. We can rename this should we wish back to displacement map, but it's not necessary for now. I'm sure you get the idea. So before we're done creating our displacement map here, there's one last step we need to do, and that is to add a slight amount of blur. The reason for this is to remove some of the texture details from the jacket, as we want the textures that we apply to follow the folds and the contours of the jacket, not the actual texture of the jacket. This jacket hasn't got a great deal of texture. If we zoom in slightly, we can see here, we can see there's slight lines kind of thing, as if like it's a denim kind of material fabric. It won't make much of an impact on our image at the moment, but if you had something like, I don't know, a wool jumper, for example, something like knitted jumper, it would certainly have an impact on the bumps in the wool. So what we need to do is we add blur, and it would take a lot of those bumps out, but it would keep in the information between the lights and the dark areas. So we're going to do that now. We can simply go to filter and then blur and Gaussian blur. Now what we need to do, that looks a bit high for me, so with this selected, I'm just going to use the cursor keys to go down in stages to get something I want. Again, the amount of blur will depend on the image that you're actually using. All we want to do is just blur it enough just to get rid of some of that texture information. I would say about there is about 1 point. Let's go for 1.5. It's a nice kind of 1.5 right there. So we're going to go for 1.5 on this image and go OK. And now that's done. So now we've created our displacement map, but we need to save it as a displacement map. This is the easy part. We go File, Save As, and when our box opens, we navigate to where we want the file to be saved, and we can call it whatever we want. In this case, I'm going to go for displacement map and hit return to save it. OK to maximize compatibility. Job done. And now we are done creating our displacement map. So the next thing is, we don't need the displacement map no more. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch on our original, and we're going to take our curves, our displacement map layer, drag it all the way down to the bin and let it go, since we don't need that. And we're back to our original image. Okay, so as I mentioned, we want to apply our textures to the model's jacket. Now, to do this, we need to make a selection of the jacket. How you make a selection is entirely up to you. I'm going to use the quick selection tool for this demonstration. Again, I'm not going to stand here or sit here and make a spend ages doing the selection. I'm going to make a very quick selection. I'm going to make it decent enough to work and look good, but the more time you spend on making a selection, the better it's going to be at the end result. So I'm just going to click, hold and drag out here to select the jacket areas here. I'll tidy some of the bits up in a moment. Drag out here, get all this selected, and this shoulder part here. Now obviously we've got this middle t-shirt part selected and some bits here we don't want. We could go up, we could take these off. We can go up here and click on the minus, and then we can, and it's, as you see, the symbol now in the middle there on the brush is kind of gone to a subtract symbol, meaning it will subtract away from the selection. And we click on this one and we get an addition, which means add to the selection. However, rather than moving our cursor up and down every time we want to change something, we can simply hold down the Alt key on a PC or the Option key, I believe, on a Mac. So as you see, I hold down the key and it turns to a minus, so we can take parts away of our selection. I let go and it turns back to an addition again. So I'm going to hold down the minus, I'm going to take this part away here. I'm going to take that bit in again, just tidy that bit up. I'm going to zoom in slightly here. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and take this middle section away. We don't want none of this information here. Again, we just want the jacket. That was pretty good to me there. We just want this area down here. I don't want to be too fussy. Again, this is not a tutorial on how to make great selections. This is a tutorial on how to do displacement maps and change textures on clothing. And that's that done. That's fine. We want a little bit here. I'm gonna get these corner bits in now. Actually, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit more here. Whoops. I'm gonna slightly make the brush smaller here. We're gonna add in this area here, up to his neck here. We're gonna take that bit away, maybe. Oh, that was not great. Click in there. We need to bring in this bit, don't we, as well? Just take that edge of the face away there, maybe. get that edge. Again, we could go around and refine all this edge, making it really tight and really nice on the jacket. I don't want, like I say, don't want to spend too long here. That looks good enough to me. Let's just tidy this little bit up here. Get it as good as we can, but without taking too long. We want to just tidy that bit up there. That bit's fine, and we want to remove this piece as well here. Let's hope that goes in. Let's take that down to there. Let's take that down to there. When you're in, incidentally, when you're in narrow areas like this, you're better off to go over the edges sometimes than just take it away. It's far easier. That'll do for me, I think. Let's just have a quick check round. Let's zoom out again. Let's have a quick check round. And yeah, you know what? I'm happy with that mask for now, or that selection for now. That will do me fine. So we've made our selection of our jacket. Now what we need to do, we can bring in our first texture. So let's go here and bring in this one. Now we're going to select our move tool, which is just here. We're going to go back to this image. We're going to click and hold, and we're going to drag up to our tab here, come down here and just let it go. And there's our image applied. So at the moment it's covering the whole image obviously and right across the selection. But before we continue, and this bit's really important as we'll see in a little while, double click on, I'll start that again. We'll right click on this layer and we'll say convert to smart object. Now as we can see, we get this small icon in our layer image window thing here, and that means it's now a smart layer. So with that done, we now want to add a mask and apply that to our selection. So all we've got to do is click on here to make a mask, and bang, we have our texture on our jacket. But as we can see, our texture doesn't quite fit our jacket. If we decide now that we want to move our selection, we want to transform this, and we hit Control T, or we go to Edit, Free Transform, and what will happen is if we resize, it's going to resize everything, not just our texture. We don't want that. So what we can do is, if we go over to our layers here, between our mask and our smart object image here, our texture, we've got a little chain link icon. If we click on the chain link, we can remove it. That means we can now move each of these items, or resize each of these items independently of each other. So if we make sure we click on this part and just the image in it, and now we go Control T or Command T on a Mac, we can now transform, or go to free, or you can go to Edit, Free Transform should you wish. So now we can drag this out a little bit to fit his collars here. We can drag this part down here maybe just to get to the bottom here. Now we can move this slightly to position our flowers how we want, and let's go for something like, let's go for something like that. That looks good enough to me. Hit return to apply that, and now we have it on our jacket. But obviously we can't see the information of our jacket, so let's put it into a blending mode. Now for this, I generally choose multiply blending mode, and as we can see, it looks pretty good, right? The results don't look too bad. You know, you could get away with this in some situations, but if we're going to zoom into this, we can see that the flowers don't really follow the folds of the jacket. They're just on there. We can see the details of the jacket through. It's just on there. It looks good. It looks okay, but it's not great. We all agree with that. It's just all right. So let's just link them together again. We can click here instantly to link these back together again to save anything going wrong. So we've got this applied. Now, obviously with the blending mode, the blending mode you choose depends on the actual image or the texture you choose to use. That was hard to say. So we can, I find most often cases, multiply, color burn, linear burn in some cases, and color generally work the best. See, for color, and this image doesn't work really at all. The flowers are very washed out. But so I'm going to use multiply. We can also change the opacity. We can bring it down or up to make it look better. But we can add that at the end. We can sort these things at the end and see what works best. So for now, I'm going to leave it in multiply mode. And now comes the part where we add back in our displacement map. So if we go into filter, I think we're here, yeah, filter. Let me think about this. Distort, sorry, filter, distort, displace and click on that, we'll get this dialog box. Now the horizontal and vertical scales are both set to 10 on mine at the moment. I find that these values, they do have an impact on the actual mapping of the displacement map. I've used 8, 9, 10 and I get decent enough results. So in this example I'm just going to leave it on 10. We want to make sure though that stretch to fit is selected and repeat edge pixels is also selected. And so we're going to go OK. Now our location of our displacement map should open up, or just navigate to that and select that and go open. Wait for Photoshop to do its magic, and there we go. The displacement map has now been applied. As we can see here, it's not kind of mapped these very well here. We can see that this is where the values come in, the 8, 9 and 10s, as I was telling you about. You know, we might need to change that slightly as it's bumped slightly there. We didn't want to do that either. But we can see that the textures, you know, in most cases it follows the texture nicely. Here is great, where the leaves are kind of just dropped into that bottom part. You've got a bit of depth there. Here with the folds of the jacket. Not too sure what's happened with this one over here. This one looks great, and this one also looks great here. This one's got a slight extra bit here. And here's not too bad either, where it goes over the shoulder. So it's not too bad. Again, we could fix this. I'm not prepared to. I'm just wanting to show you the displacement mapping place. And also, a point to note here, some textures do work better than others in most cases. So it's always worth trying a few. I'm not too sure if we're going to have a problem here on all of them. But so we've got our texture applied. Now, once we've applied our texture, we could now go to File. We could do export and export as, and we could save that as a JPEG or whatever we wanted to. That would be our first one done. Now we want to apply, say, our second texture, which is this one. The problem is we don't have to go now and delete this layer and recreate it and bring in our smart filter again and everything else. This is why we created our smart object from earlier on, because all we need to do is go to here. If we double click on this, like so, it will open up, and as you can see at the top here it says layer1.psb. Now this is the smart object layer from this jacket here that's been opened up. So if we take our artwork here and with our move tool selected, we click, hold and drag up to our smart layer and we let go, and now we can always move this about, get it to size, just slightly transform that, Control T again, slightly make it bigger than we need to here just to go over the edges. We're going to hit return. With that done, let's just go to File and Save, and Photoshop has saved that image. And if we go back to our displacement map image now, voila, we have our texture applied as if by magic. Now again, like I said before, we might want to change the blending mode now. The color burn not too great, linear burn don't look too great, color don't look too bad. It looks kind of pastel-y, looks kind of 80s maybe looking. What happens if we lower the opacity? Maybe not too bad. That actually doesn't look too bad actually. But what if we turned around and said, okay, then let's go back to multiply and now maybe lower the opacity slightly. Maybe let's have a look at that. Again, it's just a matter of playing around. It all comes down to personal taste and the final effect, obviously, that you want to achieve. This, I feel, is way overdone. And as you can see, as we leave it like this, excuse me, if we leave it like this, it doesn't really work. Okay, so we could now, if we was happy with that image, we could now go to File, Export, Export As, and save it as a JPEG again, so on and so forth. You get the idea with that now. So let's go to our third one, this texture here. Let's, with the move tool selected again, let's click, hold, drag up to here, drop it in here. We're going to slightly press Control T, we're going to slightly resize this again, hit return. We can turn these off if you want to. I'm not too sure if that makes a massive difference on the whole file size, but we go save. With that saved, we can now go back to our displacement map, and as we see, our texture has been applied. The multiply mode looks alright, colour burn looks awful, linear burn's too dark, colour, now that is very 80s, that looks really like an 80s style jacket. We've just suddenly dated this guy severely. So let's go to multiply for now. Let's change the opacity maybe, let's bring it down a bit so it looks a bit more like kind of a cotton jacket. Nice, not too bad. That isn't actually too bad. And if we zoom in now, we can see again the way the patterns follow the contours of the folds and things in the jacket. And it looks really, really kind of convincing, especially when you're zoomed in and have the image at full size. I'm at 200% here, so I'm bigger than it needs to be. But at this kind of size, it looks pretty convincing. Especially if we made the selection around these edges much, much better, it would look really, really nice. So now we've done this one. Let's go to our last texture, our floral design here. Click, hold and drag with the move tool selected, up to this smart layer again. Let it go in there. We're going to press Control T to transform again. Or remember, you can go to Edit and then Free Transform if you choose that instead. Hit Return to save that. Then we go File, Save. And there's our texture applied. That actually looks really nice. That looks really, really nice. We would have to go into our smart filter again, I think, and into our displacement map and change the settings from 10 maybe to 8 to set this back to normal again a bit more, because we still got that broken section there. I'm not too worried about it in this demonstration. Let's put the opacity back up. No, that actually looks better down. We could try a different blending mode, maybe multiply. Color burn's awful. Linear burn isn't too bad. Isn't too bad at all on this one. Color just washes it out, so multiply, I think I like that best. And again, we could save this and then we could put our images together and just show the same effect across different kind of styles. So there we have it. That's how to do a displacement map in Photoshop. Now, obviously, remember, this displacement maps are not just for changing textures on jackets and jumpers and things like that. You can really get creative with this. I mean, you could get, if you made t-shirt designs in Photoshop, you could take a photo of, say, a plain white t-shirt. You could colorize that t-shirt to whatever many colors you wanted, and you could apply your designs to those t-shirts. You know, you could have it, if you lay it on the floor and take it with slight wrinkles and bumps in it as well, you could really get to look convincing as if that design is actually printed on that t-shirt, especially if you was going into the t-shirt business and want to design and make and sell your own t-shirts. You could change the design on a flag on top of a castle or a building, for example, or the sails on a ship or flags on a ship or whatever. I mean, you could really get, like, you could get, say, an image of, say, some choppy water and on a sea, for example, and maybe apply a photo to that to follow the waves and all the patterns in the water if you wanted to. But you know, Photoshop is all about getting creative, and that's what I hope you get out of this lesson, is to take this technique and really get creative with it. So if you learned something new today, and which I hope you all did, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe for future tutorials and content. I hope to see you back here soon. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.